Hey, I'm Will Martin, and I watch a fair number of YouTube videos and I listen to the occasional podcast. And one thing that I often hear the host or the creator say is how much they either avoid reading the comments on their videos or if they do read them, how hurt their feelings sometimes get. Now, we've all been the subject of ridicule at some point in our lives, and some have been fortunate to have not received a whole lot, but most of us have been the brunt of ridicule, jokes, or outright meanness at several points in our lives. And I think that's regardless of age. It happens at work, happens amongst family, friends. You know that here and there you've been judged, mocked, ridiculed by someone, and sometimes someone close to you. I think, and I may be wrong, but I think that back when I was much younger, the mocking or the ridicule was usually behind one's back, and maybe the target of the ridicule wasn't even aware it was happening. And I think that was usually because the antagonist, who was usually too timid to say it to one's face, was the reason why. So I think many of us went about our lives kind of blissfully without really realizing, at least right away, that we were the subject of someone's nastiness. Of course, at some point, we'd become aware of it, and because that kind of gossip has to surface at some point, right? But it might take a few days, even a few weeks, or even a couple of months before we would usually become aware of it. But not today. Today, there's social media, and it's that instant pathway to say mean things, mock, or otherwise dish out the hurt. It's much quicker, sometimes instantaneous. But above all, it can now be anonymous. And that's the one thing that you really couldn't get away with back in the day. I mean, if you just had to say something nasty about someone, you kind of had to say it to another person in order to get that satisfaction of having said it, right? I mean, what good is it to just think it without really getting it out there? So if you really dislike the looks of someone, even a total stranger, your greatest satisfaction would be found by telling someone else, right? So let's just say that you're that person that always has something negative to say about someone, and you feel the need to share that negativity with a friend. If you do it enough, it's likely your friend will get tired of hearing it and will eventually get tired of you. And you might eventually realize that you have to clean up your attitude because you have realized this habit of deriding someone is just a really ugly habit. But on social media, you don't have to physically speak to someone to get that hate out there. You can just post it. You know that someone will see it, and somewhere in that antagonizer's mind, there is a hope that someone might actually agree with you. And best of all, it's anonymous. You don't risk wearing down a friend with all your vile comments. It's really the best of all worlds. Now, I'll be honest. I'm sure there were more than a few times that I was the antagonist. You go through phases in life where you're probably just not satisfied with where you're at or who you are. And for a second or two, it makes you feel superior to insult someone or criticize someone, mostly behind their back. Besides myself, I've known several people who were otherwise decent people, but they just couldn't help but comment on every person that walked by, pointing out the flaws of others, probably just to make themselves feel better, if even for just a second or two. But here's the good news, at least from my perspective. I found that the older I get, the more understanding I become and the less likely to criticize. Maybe it's because working up all that angst to criticize is more energy than I want to expend. Or maybe it's taken me a little longer to mature than others. Now, I may not agree with you, or I may not approve of what you are or what you do, but I'm not going to get down that pathway of imposing my own opinions on you. Not only is it not beneficial for me, but maybe I've just come to realize that everyone is full of crap at some point or another. Everyone lacks humility at some point or another. And everyone has a lack of empathy or understanding at some point. And I believe that for the most part, people eventually realize what a nasty person they were, and they make efforts to change. I've been there, no question about it. But who really knows? I could be very wrong, and some people may never change. Some people may be so unhappy with themselves that they will never be able to climb out of their situation. They may feel so inferior that the only way that they can gain a second of self-respect is to cut down someone else. Those are the people who hide behind the keyboard and criticize. They do it anonymously, and I can only hope it does give them a few seconds of pleasure, because it's likely the only pleasure they get in a day. Let me clarify, though, that it's perfectly acceptable in my book to disagree with someone. And I think the way social media is set up, it's likely that your voice, and when you voice your agreement, it's going to be anonymous. There's nothing wrong with that. But can't we have an interesting discussion over the disagreement? I mean, I may disagree with you and I may not change your mind, but if I decide to post my disagreement of your thesis, I will do it respectfully and with a willingness to discuss as need be. Let me clarify that this essay of mine is, not directly related to a comment that I've received on this channel. 99.9% of comments that I've received have been kind and thoughtful and represent what I think most of you probably are: kind and compassionate caregivers or future caregivers. And let me also say that after decades in EMS and the emergency department, I've heard just about every derogatory comment that can be made against me. So no comment is going to rattle me. Likely, instead, I'll just feel sorry for you.